to have Zach VanderBeek, Vanderbilt Chassis in New Sharon, Iowa with us. How's your week been, Chad?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, we're plugging away. We crossed a pretty impressive milestone for us here. We built our 500th Ultra Force machine, so we're pretty excited about that.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, no doubt about that. Well, Zach, let's talk a little bit about what you got going on. Of course, I'm sure the majority of our listeners know, of course, who you are, but of course, Zach used to be just a racer like the rest of the racers, and then he decided to get into the chassis business. I'm not going to ask if that was a good thing or if that was a bad thing, or if you just had a weak moment for a split second. And where did everybody go? Oh, there we go. But anyway, so tell us kind of what you got going on, Zach.
Well, we're busy. When we were talking before the show started here, it's a busy time of the year for building cars. So I was going to do this in the shop, but we got guys working in there right now, and trying to take up some slack that I can't handle. So it's nice to have some guys that'll kind of help me part time and do that. So we're doing really good. We're sold out probably till August, I'd say, right now. So we're gonna be busy for a while, and actually just kind of got caught up on customer stuff to where I could work on my own stuff a little bit finally and get ready for USMTS stuff. It's kind of been stressing me out, and I've been able to work on my own stuff a little bit, but finally got a little break in the action on customer stuff, and been working on mine here the past couple days, so it's been kind of nice.
Well, and I'm sure, like we were talking about before, of course, those of you, Zach's got is a brand new dad, so he's got some family obligations that I'm quite sure take up a little bit of your time.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out what sleep is again. So she's doing pretty good. She's a good little baby, and both of my girls have been good. So I can't complain. And my wife has been doing great. She takes care of a lot of it because she's staying at home for a while, like all moms do. So I gotta get up and get going in the morning. So she realizes that. So she's not too hard on me at night.
Awesome. Well, that's pretty cool. So anything new and exciting, Chad, that you want to talk about tonight?
Not really. We've been just trying to get our spring cups refined and working on that new Gen 3 machine. They've been testing that a couple weeks, so we're getting the bugs worked out of that baby, and they're going to be pretty cool. They're working on the new graphing update for that. So the Gen 3 machine, we're excited about that. It's going pretty good. And spring cups have been the hottest thing. We're working on that, the new 5.5 OD grab stuff. So we're supposed to be testing that bearing here in the next couple weeks and get that dialed in. So we're keeping busy.
Awesome. Well, that's kind of the way it's been here too. It's just been pretty steady and pretty busy, and everything's been rolling along pretty good. Today was what you would classify a typical Monday. I had some meetings in the morning, and then Amy had sent me a text, something about to make sure and stop and see Bobby first before I go up, and I'm thinking, oh, well, great. So I wonder what that's going to be about. So anyway, so we got here and then had a couple other situations, but it's just a typical Monday, and it's kind of one of those days where you think to yourself, wish I was Zach's age again, because then it would be a little bit more challenging as you. I've just learned that as age has come upon me, some of my patience have really increased, but some of my bullshit-ometer has actually decreased. So it's kind of fun. Jeff, appreciate his thanking for the shirt. Dan, we've got that tool I was telling you about, locating the front jack. What that is basically what we do is we actually take a lower control arm, we put a spring in it with a 1-inch coarse thread bolt through it, and we compress the spring, and that's actually what you use. It's back in the shop. I could definitely go get that here in a little bit, and we could bring it up here and I could show you what it is. Hi, Joey. feel bad for you having to be in Florida, man. I mean, gosh, we got 12 inches of snow and just kind of what we normally do here in Iowa. Aaron, glad you're coming next Friday. Yep, we're all excited about the school. We've got a good group of people coming for the school this week, and sounds like the weather on Friday is going to be good, but it's going to be good on Saturday. Just going to be a little bit chilly. Last school, them guys drove for hours in a snowstorm to get here, and all 50 guys made it, and that's what I call determination, man. I was impressed. Is there an on-track performance difference in the Weir's right rear bearing cage versus the right rear bushing cage in an IMCA modified? That's a great question, Chad.
Well, actually, we got the perfect panelist tonight for bronze versus bearing.
There we go.
Yeah, so the bronze cage, the theory is there that, or at least our theory, and I think Zach agrees, is that when the car rolls over, there's a little bit of friction there, kind of holds the car on the right rear to get that side bite. And I think that's the common agreement, right, Zach? That's kind of what we're thinking there.
Yeah, I would say that's correct. It's kind of a controlled bind or friction, like you say, and it's kind of one of them deals where it's kind of shock valving versus sprint. The cage, if it's gonna have more friction or take more force to rotate it, then your rebound number shouldn't need to be as much. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I'm going to be doing some more testing with that to see if we're missing something there a little bit. But there's no doubt that in some testing that I've done that we went faster with the bronze cage and had more right rear feel, and that's pretty much probably the best explanation for it is what you said. So can it be a variable? Probably. If you could make the bearing work, and most guys do, they run that, that may be a better deal. So that's what we've ran, and I haven't really deviated far from it because we've been pretty good. So, but I'm going to do some more testing with that.
All right. Jason, on a sport mod, can the Weir's rear lower shock mounts swivel be welded and not bind without changing the Heim joint spacers?
Yeah, so the swivels, a lot of guys are running them tight, and Zach can maybe go a little bit on that too, but for years we thought we had to have a swivel there and had to spin it, and then you lose track of your maintenance. It actually loosens up and can bend or shear off. So yes, you can. IMCA, they kind of want that welded, but if you tighten that swivel up and you run the car through motion and the shock doesn't bind up, generally you won't have any issues there. Do you run yours tight?
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's I've done it both ways, but for probably the best way is to tighten your clevis up at the correct angle that you need to have it for your shock angles and stuff like that. And then there's plenty of misalignment, in the shock itself and the clevis itself to, not bind. So, swivel just, it can get bound up a little bit if it can't turn or if you don't keep that maintenance nice. So I found that tightening them up in the correct location is best.
Yeah, we did a deal where probably 10 years ago we put a Torrington bearing on there because we were thinking bind free, but then that swivel just always rotated against the shock Heim, and it was actually just shaving on that, making chips. So when you have a Heim in the end of the shock, that's kind of your swivel point. So running them tight is definitely fine.
Yeah, you just would want to make sure your alignment is correct before you tighten it down, just like what these two guys said. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
What's the best rear control arm bushings to run on an IMCA stock car? Well, Cody, actually, I hate to say this, but I'm not as familiar with the bushings. Do you know, either one of you guys know what they're running on the stock cars?
I don't.
Yeah, that's
I know they used to be really they can kind of watch that there wasn't too much movement and stuff, but that I've been out of a stock car long enough and haven't kept up on it. But you know, uh, I think you don't want too soft, but I don't think you want too rigid either. So, but I think they watch that too. I don't know what they allow.
I just still believe that a good quality Moog joint, something that's, a little better quality bushing is going to really be the best in the long run. I know they've tried a lot of different things where they've tried bushings that were soft on one side and stiff on the other. The problem with some of that stuff is it works great until it goes away. And it's kind of like back in the day when we ran leaf springs. I mean, leaf springs were great, but they might last 18 out of 20 laps. And the problem is when it goes away, it really puts you in kind of a situation. But I'll do some more research on that, and maybe for next week or when we do the show here in a couple of weeks, I'll give you a little more input on that. Dan wants to talk about, it knows it's possible to bind up a 4-bar open motor UMP car by adjusting or putting too much split in the 4 bars. What's your opinion on that? I mean, you can bind up a 4-link car pretty easily, but if everything's working together, splitting them, I don't think is going to cause a bind.
Well, it's going to require a lot more spring load to hold the car up, at that spot, because you're trying to. I'm assuming if they're saying split them on the left rear, is that what he's saying? Or
I would say either or, but split.
Yeah, I mean left rear stuff. You're gonna if you're flatter on the bottom bar and higher on the top bar with the way the suspension is with the spring behind on the cage, it's gonna take more spring load to hold the car up at that spot. So in a way, that's kind of you could say a more of a bind than if you had more angle on the lower rod, less angle on the top rod, because the top rod is going to be trying to pull the chassis down and the bottom rod's trying to push the chassis up. So you flatten that bottom bar out, it's going to take a lot more load to push the car back up. So it's kind of I kind of relate it to like if you're running more lower bar angle, you don't need near as much extended load to hold the car up. Or a static or in dynamic motion. So that's the two differences. So people make fun of me for this analogy, but if you think of the left rear suspension as a V, and the back part of the V is your spring and the front part of your V is your bar, well, the more the front part of the V has angle in it, the more that spring is going to be trying to push up like this. So you flatten that V out, it's going to take a lot more spring load to hold the car up.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Yep, that's a good analogy, actually. Jeffrey, B-mod on the left rear axle, good or bad? Well, I mean, it's going to drive good. You're going to get, in my opinion, you're going to have more traction with a B-mod if you put that spring on top in front of the axle housing. When on your USRA B-mod stuff, what do you guys do, Zach?
He's saying weight on the axle. He said weight on the axle.
Oh, weight on the axle.
Weight.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I read that wrong.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you answer that one, Chad.
Well, there's no doubt that ballast is load and load is traction. As we keep saying, the problem there is when you get into a rough track situation, having that unsprung weight is going to be bad. Generally, the left rear, you can drag it through the bumps and get away with it. So if it's legal and you can run an axle clamp, lead clamp, and you can put 40 on when the track is super smooth and dry and you can use it to your advantage, that's definitely a good thing to do. But when there's a little bit of rough and chop and that kind of thing, you're going to want to not have it on there. So Zach, I think you'd agree with all that.
Yeah, I do. I mean, we don't feel like we need to really have the lead on there, in our stuff. But I think it's more like in the USMTS stuff, like we can run weight on there, but it's more of a like maybe a lift arm thing where you start lacking a little bit of grip with the lift arm as far as left rear traction goes. So it's kind of free traction there to be able to bolt some lead on there. But yeah, it's definitely you want to pick and choose the times you do it, because the track conditions can make or break you on that deal, and you bounce you around pretty good in there if you got too much unsprung weight, I believe. So
Yeah, that's where you're going to need a good dentist if you don't put it on in the right spot. There's no doubt about that. Chad, how do you know what your pinion angles should be set at? Is there an idea to be just like 0 at full hike on a 3-link car? Actually, Chad, I would agree with that. I mean, I think you want to try to, in my opinion, your full extended load, right front's down and the left rear is up and the right rear is somewhat down. It's probably better to be close to that 0, and that's kind of why we always start out within that 7 degree pinion angle range. I've had some engineers tell me that if it goes past 0, that makes no difference. In my opinion, I kind of go back to that torque tube effect, like on the old sprint car stuff, that, the angle is kind of trying to help you work that out. So once again, setting the pinion angle, like in Jeff's situation, set pinion angle at ride height or dynamic. Well, I think, you're setting it at ride height, but, you want to check it so that your beginning measurement is better at dynamic. What's you guys' opinion?
yeah, I think you want to obviously you got to figure out your starting point, because when you're setting it up in the shop, you got to reference your static pinion angle. So, but in a 3-link car, where you don't have a pull bar, you can kind of see what's going on a little bit better. But I agree that whatever you end up with for drop on your left rear and everything's in the dynamic motion, you want to have the driveline alignment angle about right. Just your low horsepower cars in that class, so you want to have that pretty spot on. That's going to be your best mousetrap for having the most the least amount of drag anyway. But in the A mod stuff, it's it's hard to achieve that unless you start out with like your pull bar almost flat or uphill, so which that typically doesn't really race that great. So some guys do it, but for our stuff, we've tested it a little bit, and it would take some work to get it right. There's some other things that have to be adjusted, but yeah, the way you explained it, I agree with.
Chad, can I use a Torrington bearing on the original ID spring drop cup?
I would say no. Just we started using Torrington bearings on our right sides a couple years ago. Nick Hoffman was running them, and of course they're exposed, so they become a throwaway item because we're dirt racing and they get abused pretty hardcore. So that's part of the cool thing with the OD grab, is that then it keeps that bearing inside that cup where it can be sealed and contained, and it doesn't get beat up and destroyed by the dirt and the rocks, and then you can take it out and easily clean it. So I would say you can, but it's going to be a life expectancy of maybe 5 nights if you're lucky.
Don't you have the aluminum piece that would go on the cup too, that you could put the bearings in or something, don't you?
Yeah, if you don't want to buy the new cups, you can put the spring alignment plate on the old cups and then have the shielding around it, if your rules will allow you to run that aluminum adapter. Basically, that's how we evolved. We started with that little ring that went on there on the sliders, and then put them on the old style cups. And we just kind of realized that we shouldn't probably sell you a cup and a retainer for twice as much money as we can just make you an OD grab cup. So that's kind of the evolution of how that all worked out.
Well, and the thing is with running the OD cup, you're going to have everything contained, like you said. But when you're running the standard cup, that spring can kind of work around. So with the spring moving along with that bearing to try to work, it's just like Chad said, it's just 5 nights is probably going to be minimum, and that would cause a problem eventually. People still running Stagger or just mounting 19S's on the back with running them without measuring them. Well, I really wouldn't say that that's probably the case, Ricky. I think that we're starting to see people running more of the 19S. I think it's a better imprint on the racetrack. And if you do enough research, you can still get a fairly decent amount of Stagger with that 19. And a lot of guys, it just all depends on how much steer you have in the car. A lot of guys don't, some guys like running Stagger and some guys not a fan. I would, I guess I should ask you, Zach, what your opinion is, but I'd be willing to bet, knowing your driving style, you're probably not a huge fan of Stagger.
Yeah, I feel like straight line up off the corner, less Stagger is a better feel, but you still can get yourself in trouble if you don't have enough, because it is an arc that we're trying to go around in the corner. So you should need X amount of Stagger to, if you didn't have power to spin the tires to get on around the corner, then obviously you would need Stagger. So, but that's just we're not racing that way. So I typically am a less Stagger guy, and most of my guys are, like in the G60 type tire, in the Hoosier, and what we run in US MTS. It's just seems like that tire is more of a low Stagger type tire versus racing UMP type stuff, where those guys might sneak up and Stagger. I'm hearing big numbers from those guys, but sometimes it's just driver preference too.
Well, and the thing is when you have a lot of Stagger, of course, your right rear is the one that's going to tend to run a little bit warmer, just for that reason. But then again, like Zach said, the biggest thing is you still have to rotate the middle of the corner. Okay. So it kind of just depends on the situation. And, it's like Zach's 100% right. I mean, I'll have guys that'll run 2.5 to 3 inches of Stagger and think it's great. And then the car next to them will be an 1.25 inches and think that's the best. So it's driver preference. Zach, when a track slicks off, do you change carbs or use any restrictors? If so, do you also make gear change?
Typically, yes. You make a gear change if you did take some power away. So probably over the past couple of years, I've kind of found a motor combination that works really good for myself, but it's got the right camshaft in it, and I don't typically need to restrict. I feel like the combination of having that correct and then having the car to where it has enough traction to where the point where I get, if I kill power, it just kills me. So I haven't had to really do that, but over the years, there has been some times where I've taken, somewhere around the neighborhood of 50 to 100 horse out of our stuff in the US MTS, and then we'll usually put about 30 to 40 points of gear in when we do that. So example, when I won the King of America, whenever that was, 16 or 17, whenever that was, we ran a deep gear and killed 100 horse, and for that 75 or 100 lap feature that we ran, that was the ticket to keeping the tires on the car. We were just way better at the end than everybody else. So it definitely has its advantages if you have a motor that's not controllable, or if you're just not as good with your foot. You might be a good candidate for you.
Yeah, the only downside to the restrictor is it might restrict it too much in the wrong area on the racetrack. That could cause the car to, maybe not want to rotate like it would want to. It helps it up off, but maybe it's, there's a flat spot that might make the car harder to drive. But once again, it's just
that's where the gearing comes in, I think.
Yeah.
Where it helps pick the car up quicker, and doesn't get you in trouble. But still, yeah, if you're too tight, you're too tight. So just got to make sure you're adjusted right for it.
XL, do you feel the new caliper?
The rest of that question's down below, Bob.
Okay.
It must have got cut off, but the rest of that question is down below, like 5.
Oh, you feel the new calipers are allowing for the IMCA modified to bring any benefit over what's being run now? Well, I mean, the biggest benefit with the new calipers is they're lighter. So, you got a little bit less unsprung weight. It's a nice piece. They've done a great job. If I had if my car was a year old and I didn't have them on there, I don't know if that would be exactly where I would spend my money to change. But if I was building a new car, most definitely. What are you guys putting on your cars now? What's your opinion, Zach, of that new caliper from Willwood?
Well, I've got I ordered direct from Spike and Willwood, and I've got him. I think they're a pretty hot item. In fact, I think they've got to the point where they had to build some more when I asked him if he could send me some to look at. So I personally have not been able to use them yet or have them in my hands, but it seems like a good piece. It seems like they obviously the ability to have it on a left or a right, have one part number, that's kind of nice. But I've just been on the IMCA stuff. We use like the AFCO type type caliper seems to be the best for us right now, and the open stuff we can run aluminum stuff, so we run
Sure.
aluminum Willwood stuff on it. So
Yeah, I know we've got quite a few that are back ordered, so they are definitely between all that California COVID stuff that's going on in their shipping department. It does seem like there's been a little bit of a struggle in some aspects. IMCA AMOD, what differences are there in how the car feels and reacts running a floater separate from the birdcage versus brake attached to the birdcage? Chad, we will see you in Antioch on the 20th.
Awesome. So brake on the, Zach can talk about that a little bit. You're a brake floater guy, right?
I've been both, and it just all depends on the left rear cage arrangement, in my opinion. There's just so he's asking the difference between the two. Is that the question?
Yeah.
Floater versus on the cage, yeah.
Okay. So if you run, I would say, a higher index curve where you've got the lower bar flat, and when I say high index curve, it means if you started static at 0 and ends up the cage rolls forward 8 degrees or more, that would be a high index curve. To me, the being clamped to the cage is going to be way more effective than if you were on a floater, in my opinion, because you got the top link, it's got some angle in it typically with that arrangement. And if you were running something that didn't have as much indexing, that's, if it started at 0 and ended at 0. Now, when I say that, if you look at the bottom of like Chad's cage plates, that's kind of a reference point. If you start out 0 and you end with 0, at full drop, then I feel like the floater is probably a better option. It's going to be more effective than being on the cage. But that's my opinion, and that's what I felt is probably in testing has been the biggest difference.
Awesome. Dana, I'm not sure between left and right. So we need to
get a comment already.
Okay. All right. On a sport mod, what would the effect be of a third link mounted very close to the rear end housing and very little angle, almost level? Todd, I've not actually experimented with it being that close. I know one of Zach's customers, when he was running the Wissota B-Mod, ran his real close to the housing back when he was running a B-Mod years ago, and felt that he had more traction with that. We're still in that 11-inch center up from where we always have been, and haven't really experimented with that. What have you had much with your customers, Zach? Have you had anybody trying that flatter stuff?
Yeah, we've experimented with it a little bit, but it's kind of one of those things where it's the closer you are to the center line of the axle tube, the more force that's going to have. So you're gonna, you know, you're typically going to have more force there, but there's going to be things that happen a little quicker because it's close to the center of the axle. And we've our stuff is better having it up in that, like you said, that 10 to 12 inch range, and we just live by that and don't really deviate far from it. So
I think the big thing is drivability, right? I mean, the closer you get it down there, the more erratic the car is going to be, I think.
correct.
Yeah, and when you take the angle out of it, you're not. It's not going to want to try to drive that on the brake set. It's not going to want to drive it over on the rack front, which is kind of what you need to have to a point, so that the car helps get over on the rack front, helps the car pivot around the rack front.
Yeah, that and you start flattening out the pull bar. You talk about, you hear about anti-squat and squat and stuff like that, where the flatter the pull bar is that's not going to want to lift the back of the car up as much. So can make the car initially kind of be a little bit lazy on getting up, but it should typically be more traction that way though too, because you're basically holding load and the rear tire is better that way. So but that you could talk to your blue in the face about what's the correct angles and all that kind of stuff too. There's a lot of different variables that go along with pull bar angle, in my opinion. So
Wade's got a question. What is your suggested lubricant for Heim joints? For rear bars and shocks, I have heard to stay away from wet lubricants such as WD-40 and the PB Blaster. Well, I'm not a huge fan of either one of them. We've always run like a tri-lube kind of oil-based, not necessarily wet, but a little bit of an oil-based. What's your recommendations?
I've always I'm a big FK rod end guy. FK's a big supporter of mine, and that's all we put on the race cars. And typically all our stuff is Teflon line. So we don't suggest that anybody puts any lube on them. Actually, just make sure the dirt's out of them and everything's nice and free and clean. And that's your maintenance.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to lubricate a Teflon line one, because you put the wrong lubricant there and it affects that Teflon. You're going to have a mess.
Right.
For Zach, what do you feel VanderBeek cars are doing compared to other chassis manufacturers that separate you guys from the rest of the competition as far as the IMCA cars? Well, here we go. Sales pitch time, buddy.
Well, when me and JD Gresham first kind of got together and we decided we were going to do this deal, I just wanted to make sure I hit the market of guys that wanted nice cars. And I'm not saying anybody builds a lesser quality product, but I feel like we spent a lot of time and focus a lot of energy on making sure we have the nicest, one of the nicest cars, if not the nicest car out there. So, and then to make them fast to boot, should be able to sell that all day long, if they're nice cars and they're fast. But we just, I really try to, we keep the overhead low so I can not build too many cars, so I can help my customers out more that way. And I'll be honest with you, it's, we've got 49 cars out there. We started building in 17 was the first one. And then the third car, I think, was the end of 17, I think. So, we've been pretty steady, and that's, it seems like a lot of cars to me, but that's not compared to a lot of guys that build more cars. But I don't know, we just make sure the customer has what they need and they have a good quality product, and hopefully I've been racing long enough, I can give them enough knowledge to go fast, and I guess, that's all I got to say about it, really. It's I feel like that's what we do. So,
Well, service and quality is by far the #1 game in the world, in my opinion. What happens is sometimes when you get too big, some of that lacks. And that's one of the things, because I've been on both sides of this situation where we used to build 120 cars a year, and just to the point where you get stretched so thin that you don't feel like you're giving everybody what they really need. We're doing it the way you do it, on a limited basis. And like you said, when you're on a limited basis, or you built X amount of cars, you've got a little more structure involved. And I think there's, not saying either way is good or bad. It's just, it's a different type of a thing. I've seen guys that have tried building 200 cars a year, and their quality kind of went downhill to be able to do that. And
yeah, you can't help that many customers, and that's probably one of the biggest things I get when somebody has switched from somebody else, is they weren't getting the help that they needed. That's probably the number one that I hear. So, and even I could do better, So that's one thing that I'd like to keep making Vanderbilt a more well-oiled machine, so it takes a little load off of me, and I can continue to do that and give the customers what they need.
Yep, great point. Is there a special swedge tube for the right front A-frame on the front side for clearance to mount the shock outside of the A-frame rather than the mounting it through the A-frame? The only one that I actually know, and maybe you guys can correct me, the T-Shaw guys, they build an upper control arm that's kind of got a bow in it that allows the shock, and I know those cars mount the shock in front of the A-frame, but to my knowledge, that's the one that How about you guys?
Yeah, that's like the elite cars, and Nick Hoffman, I think they build their own uppers, and they have a bend, and I think he mounts off the back and then uses Chad's caliper mount to move the brakes to the front. But another company that builds the one that does a lot of that is, I think, Joel out there at CRS.
Close Racing.
He builds a upper for about whatever you need, so front or rear, to have more clearance. So
yeah, he would definitely be a good guy to get a hold of, because more than likely they have built some for somebody, and they build. I seen a deal where, was it Saturday or whatever, they built 50 upper A-frames or something like that. There was a deal on Facebook about, so I don't know, something about that. So they build quite a few A-frames. They're the ones that actually build our control arms, and I think they build yours too, don't they, Zach?
They do some stuff. We keep some of our guys service with them, but we've since decided to do some of our own stuff a little bit, and we use Chad's cross shafts and just doing more stuff in house a little bit there to just have some quality control. And Joel's stuff, their stuff was really good. That wasn't the issue. So we just wanted to continue to try to make our stuff a little bit better, and then we can make changes and all that kind of stuff ourselves.
Sure. Well, one of the new things that we've got on our website, we finally got our new digital angle finding gauge with the BHE brand on it. These are on sale for $39.99 on the website. We finally got in the Day-Lube grease that you can get in bulk, so you can fill your syringe, or whether you're working on your sliders or your bearings or whatever you're working on. It's kind of a situation. Those are available on the website. Yeah, these angle finders are $39.99. Don't forget about the school this weekend. Those of you who are not able to make it, like out east or whatever, it is online at IMCA TV. Once again, we've got some new videos. We just posted a couple new videos last week on the RTI Knowledge Center, and I know we've got a couple more coming up. So keep that in mind. We're working on that, trying to keep more stuff coming on that all the time. Dennis, if you move your pull bar from the center directly above the rear end housing to 3 inches ahead of the housing, should you shorten the pull bar 3 inches or keep it the original length and use a 3-inch further mount on the front mount as long as the chassis has that option? In my opinion, I would think that you would want to probably have the same length, but then again, you also have to understand the pickup point in the car. If you move the pickup point in the chassis 3 inches ahead, it's going to actually change a little bit more of the balance of the car. So in all honesty, you'd probably be better off just shortening the pull bar that 3 inches. What's your opinion?
I'd say a lot depends on the car, right? I mean, if you don't have the front mount adjustability, then you just shorten it, but shortening at 3 inches it depends on what you're looking for too. I mean, why are you moving it 3 inches forward? But I'd say it depends on how the car is built. Zach, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say Bob, you were right on. If you're moving it on the chassis, you're going to have a far greater effect than what you're doing on the rear end side. So it depends on what you're wanting to do. If your goal was to see how the car acted by moving it forward on the rear end, that would be, I would just shorten the pull bar up and keep your mount the same on the chassis, because you're just making 2 changes there, and you're not probably, you're creating two things to test there that you don't know what did what. So I would recommend doing one at a time if it was me.
Yeah, by far, because you wouldn't, if you did them both at the same time, you wouldn't know. Like I said, you're affecting more of a balance situation when you move that ahead on the chassis. Jeff says, Chad, what are the tweaks on the spring cups? I need to order a drop cup and a regular, but I want to wait till you have them perfect, like I know you will. Way to go, Chad.
The cups are perfect. The only thing that we're working on is nobody makes the 5.5-inch Torrington bearing for the stock car style springs. So we made a custom adapter here to be able to get them in testing. And then the production run of them from the bearing manufacturers is about 90 days out. So we're just that, the whole OD grab trend and everything, the 5-inch Torrington bearing we had made 15 years ago. And now, I probably should have made the 5.5 at the same time, but here we are with OD grab cups and no bearings. So bear with us. We'll have 5.5-inch bearings in 3 months or less.
All right. Next question. Brian wants to know, Zach, with the new IMCA shock rule on the right front, what are you recommending to do differently to achieve the same performance as the short shaft light spring combo?
The short answer is you can't. If you can't preload against the shock, there's no point in even being close to preloading. So, in my opinion, you're going to have to maybe do some spring rate changes and make the car start at a different height versus if you are running say a softer spring and you were preloaded against your shock at a certain spot, and if you would unhook the shock and your ride height would go way up, then that may negatively affect how the car acts on initial restarts and stuff like that. But I've been really hesitant to understand to realize what's actually going on there a little bit, because when you are able to, if you get it right, I say it can be pretty good, but the car really should never race. Say you held it at ride height, for instance, and you were pinned and you were preloaded against it at that spot. The car should only be there when you're rolling through the pits or rolling around there on the parade lap. So I really, like I said, if you're really good about to see these guys, getting them up on the left rear and sparks flying before they take the green, you're pushing way past your ride height spot anyway. So I don't see a huge benefit of preloading against it to begin with, personally, on our stuff, and we really weren't on our stuff. So I would say, to answer your question, though, you're probably, if you don't want your ride height to be super high, you're going to have to go to a stiffer spring and start the car lower to achieve the same end load number.
Lance, just got all my front spring new OD cups and bearings from Weir's. Great stuff. Question is, do you put any grease or lubricant on the Torrington bearing before you install them on all four corners? By all means, we do put some lubricant on there. I'll let you, Chad, tell them what they need to do.
Yeah, just a small amount. I mean, you don't need to get crazy with it. Obviously, the grease tends to attract the dirt, but just a little bit of grease in there, and you're gonna want to. I'd say probably every 5 races you're going to be cleaning them and working on them and making sure they're good, and then re-greasing them. So it's definitely going to be a maintenance piece that needs to be attended to for sure.
Dana talks about running a metric clip over the Chevelle clip. Is there a track advantage, and how much? Actually, I never could see any advantage to running that metric clip. The Chevelle clip is a little bit wider. You get well, the biggest thing with the Chevelle clip is your spring ratio on the lower control arm. I think it's like 31% difference, where the metric stuff, the spring is too inboard. So then that's kind of why you end up having to run stiffer springs to try to create a balance. But the problem is then when you try to, you're kind of crutching things a little bit. I've never been a huge fan of the metric front end. What's your opinion?
I haven't had enough experience with it to be able to tell you. There's some advantages on the pivot heights of a metric stub, I think, a little bit, but aside from that, I don't see enough of an advantage to do big changes there. And I think maybe Corey at Raid, I think Rage maybe played with it a little bit this year. I think I seen, and I don't know what they found with it, but I think you can probably about make anything work if you get the right balance and everything. But I feel like you're probably playing in a better field with the Chevelle overall in all conditions. So, but somebody else may have a different opinion on that. So.
Well, and I think like years ago, they were doing the metric clips with Chevelle or with Nova lower A-frames and all kinds of different combinations. And I don't know, to me, it goes back to that same thing, that all the parts are readily available for Chevelle. So I think they work really well. The Chevelle, when the Camaro stub was originally built, it was built off of the same geometry as what the Chevelle was, and that's just kind of the direction that we always went. That's when we first started building cars way back when. We went with the Chevelle, and the reason I went with the Chevelle is because that's what Ed Howe, who was a pavement builder, had such good luck with until the Camaros come out. Well, with the INC rules, we couldn't put a Camaro stub on there because it needed to have the side frame rails on it. So we went with the Chevelle, and I know people have tried the heavy Impala metric stuff. That metric Impala is definitely wider, but it's quite a bit heavier. And I know there were some cars built that way last year, and it just takes, I'm not saying that they wouldn't work. It just takes a little longer to get everything going. Chris just jumped on the VHE shock program. Thanks, Bobby, for taking the time to understand what I'm looking for and building me some shocks. Pretty awesome tech support. Well, I appreciate that, Chris. It's always nice to know. Spring fatigue. How often should springs be replaced, including the pull bar? Well, I think it depends on the brand of spring you're on. In my opinion, it's kind of like everything. When we talk to our customers about it, the right side springs take a tremendous amount of abuse. Now, if you've got a 4-link car and you're running a 75-pound spring or a 50-pound spring in the left rear, let's think about it. I mean, how much abuse that's going to take. So in reality, how often do you buy a new tire? When you put that tire in as a consumable source, sometimes the springs need to be looked a little bit that way. What has your experiences been, Zach?
I feel like we, falls back in the same category I talked about earlier on, putting the best thing in the car, and I feel like the Eibach Platinum stuff is what we've been running, and I personally have not had anything fail with those. And I actually had a customer message me today, and he said, I haven't put any new springs in my car since the car was new, and he's probably got probably close to 80 nights on the car, I suppose. Maybe not quite that many, but still, that's quite a few nights on the same springs. But he's really fast. The car's good, and he said, I don't think I should even mess with it. So I suggested rating them. I mean, if you got one of Chad's machines and you got the tooling to check front springs, rate tells you a lot. It doesn't tell you some things, but with springs, but rate your springs and see where you're at least, and then and monitor it as best as you can. But you're right, it is gonna fatigue a little bit, and probably a good rule of thumb is to change your springs after X amount of nights, and then you don't have to worry about it. But there again, the new spring that you get may not rate quite the same as what you were running, and if you were happy with how the car was, make sure you do a little checking before you just throw them in the trash.
Well, and that's the thing, which most people don't understand, the fact that a spring fails on the rebound side of it, not necessarily on the compression side of it. And so that's kind of where, like, the machine that what Chad uses, and we do this quite a bit for our customers, is we rate that spring, and then they can send it back to us at a certain point in time. And if it has not changed on the rebound and it hasn't changed much on the compression, I think you're right. And it just goes back to the old adage, like you said, sometimes in this community or this industry, you get what you pay for. And we sell a lot of Eibach springs. We sell a lot of Eibach Platinums. And that's kind of our choice to go to too. I know there's some other spring companies out there that do a good job, and that's just what we've had good experience with, and that's kind of what we went with. And we have Landrum too, and Landrum's a good spring. So it's, once again, it's just a thing that to monitor. And when we talk about it in our school, monitoring the actual height of the spring, because once a spring starts to lose its height, it's going to actually stiffen up, and so you can watch that a little bit too. I'm having a rear clip off of an old metric modified redone. I am going from Z-Link on both sides to a 4-link. Being a newer modified driver, what will the car do differently for me on the racetrack? Well, one of the things that you have to understand, the 4-bar, in a sense, the upper bar on the right side actually can kind of work as a spring or work as roll resistance. Plus the fact that it's indexing into the spring as it rolls over, so you're getting some spring stiffness out of it that way too. So you're going to find, in my opinion, the Z-Link car is pretty common to go over there and lay over and fall over and lay on the right side. And then once you finally get it turned, it comes off the corner like a Jack the Bear. The problem is sometimes it's not as negotiable through the middle of the corner. So in my opinion, I think you're going to see a little bit more side bite. I think the car is going to be more throttle controllable. What's you guys' opinion of the Z-Link car? I'm not a big fan, so unless you already figured that out.
I feel like you covered it pretty good. I haven't had a whole lot of experience with it other than back in the Skyrocket days. We did the Z-Link right rear stuff, so But yeah, it's been so long ago. I don't have a whole lot of data to share with you on that.
Well, and in those days, we were more. I shouldn't. I mean, in a sense, I think that we were more horsepower and drag race situations than momentum and corner speed. And now, the way things have trended, that momentum, corner speed, phase two of the corners is the biggest key. I mean, whoever gets through that part of the corner the fastest is really going to be the one that has the race winning car. We got this lady here, Zach. Her first name is Barb, and she says, Mama Beek says, if you really want to know the difference, try a Vanderbilt.
See, there's my sales lady right there.
Okay, so now, Mom's on here kind of helping you out a little bit here, Zach.
Yeah.
And of course, Dad's always helping you out too.
Right.
And let's talk about that. How do these guys get a hold of you? Where do these guys need to go? Get a Vanderbilt chassis.
Well, I would say so at first we were kind of overwhelmed. I'll be honest with you. It was like I kind of shut down a little bit because we were like too busy almost to the point where I was like, I can't build any more race cars. So we shut the messages off on the Vanderbilt Facebook page to kind of control some of that, and just it was just overwhelming, and I didn't want to. I hate saying no to somebody. I wish I could build everybody a car and be able to help them out, but that just wasn't feasible. But a lot of people message me on my Zach VanderBeek Racing page, so you can, if you're interested in a car, you can check there and send me a message on there, and we can definitely help you out from there. So but yeah, you guys got to be okay with waiting until midsummer at this point. we're busy, and just that's the reality of it. So
well, and of course, Mr. Dotson didn't make you look too bad down there in Arizona either.
Yeah, that's our IMCA program has been great, but with Caden Carter and and the Arnesons, they were in our stuff, they were fast, and just the IMCA stuff has just been really good. Trip Gaylord, there's I'd like to list them all out, but with Ethan doing his thing, it's our IMCA stuff is good. So if you and we're gonna keep making it better. So if you want a good IMCA hot rod, get with me. But like I said, you're gonna have to wait a little bit, unfortunately, and that's where it sucks to have to tell people that. But that's how we're doing. That's how I do the business. I'm not gonna start buying more jigs and hiring more guys to weld them. We're happy with what JD does for us, and does an awesome job, and we can control everything that we got going on. So that's our business model, and that's what we're going to stick to. So
well, and my philosophy back in the day always was, do what you do best and leave the rest for the rest.
Right. Yeah, there's room for everybody on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of chassis builders out there. That's definitely not a shortage. Zach, I bought numerous manufacturers' cars and I'm amazed at your quality. When I visit the Blease garage and see yours, it's top-notch quality.
Well, I appreciate that. Like I said, JD is there's a lot of guys that can weld, but I think JD is an exception. He's a human robot, and he takes pride in it, and he does really, really good work for us. And then we put obviously the best parts on the car we can with Chad's stuff, and just continue to keep making things nicer and better.
Well, and I had over the weekend, I had one of my customers' wives that told me that I needed to wear a different hat on the show. So I am supporting Ben and Rex and my buddies at AFCO tonight. Got a different hat. Now she didn't say nothing about color, because I always wear black hats. But however, since she mentioned that, I did decide to do a little bit of digging in the archives. So watch for the shiny spot. I'll try to do it quick. Okay. Check this baby out.
That's
1981.
badass. Wow.
Yeah, that looks good.
Yeah, 1981. Now, of course, it's kind of deteriorated, so I had to put paper towels underneath here so it wouldn't fall down and stuff. But so anyway, so now I wore a different color hat and different hat. So I hope, Laurel, you're watching. Okay, we've got time for about 2 more questions. I have the Weir's chain adjuster on the left rear. When would I want to shorten or lengthen the chain, a quarter or a half an inch IMCA modified? Well, my opinion, of course, would be a half an inch would be a mile. But, you know, we did it in our video. I talk about the fact that sometimes I think there's a little bit more to that chain than what people understand. The chain definitely can control roll steer. The problem is if you change and just try to control the roll steer, you might lose some angle. So sometimes if you're controlling roll steer, you almost need to change the upper bar, and you need to try to keep your bars still at the length that you want them to get maximum traction, and then shorten the chain up to get your roll steer correctly. And we actually have the simulator behind us, and I was going to actually get to this, but lo and behold, it's already 8:02. What's your opinion on that, Zach?
There's just so many different variables when you adjust the left rear chain. Like you said, you're increasing roll steer. There's some negative effects of putting too much left rear chain in. I feel like you start to pick up the right rear car too much, and then that can cause some negative effects on corner entry. There's some balance issues if you get too much. Obviously, the short answer is it's you're typically when you put more chain in, you're going to increase dynamic bite numbers, so you're increasing left rear traction, to say. But if you increase too much steer and you roll steer too much, that can be a negative effect and can maybe cancel that kind of stuff out. So you just gotta know what your limit is and what the best balance is. So you can't, I've got a number that I can't go past on my stuff, because I start picking left front tire off the ground, and you start making balance issues. And like I said, probably the biggest thing is taking the right rear tire out of the game, and you start lifting the left rear chassis too high. So just keep it somewhat in check. Don't get too crazy.
Yeah, that's where a quarter of an inch one way or the other, you'll find your sweet spot, and it's definitely worth experimenting with, but you'll find with that left rear chain, a half an inch is actually quite a bit. Who are each of you picking to win the Super Bowl? Well, I've got
the Packers.
The Packers?
Not the Packers.
Oh, not the Packers. I was going to say, I didn't think they were in the list.
They blew it.
I'm not actually going to comment on that thing, because my number one oldest daughter is definitely, who's that old guy that's quarterback? Oh, Brady. Yeah, Tom Brady. She's definitely a Brady fan, so I'm going to just stay out of it. How about you guys?
Chiefs.
I'd say the Chiefs are going to probably get it done.
Well, you got to realize some of us old men can still actually get shit done.
Yeah.
You just never know. It's not over till it's over. Chad, with your front cups on the swivel joint, would you need bearings inside the OD cup? I'll let you answer that one. Totally two different things.
We kind of talked about this a couple weeks back, but the small bearing is basically your screw jack misalignment and gives you the angular rotation alignment that you need. But when you put all the load on that small bearing, it doesn't spin like you want to for the spring twist. So that's where having the Torrington bearing to take away the spring twist load is just twice as effective. So basically you get the alignment issue and you get the spring twist to take the spring friction out of the equation. So it is kind of a necessary two evils there.
Sounds like a plan. Okay, Noah's got a question. over rail car versus under rail car, which is best?
I've typically had better. Our stuff is under rail. My opinion on that is anything you can do to eliminate flex in where your rear springs and shocks mount is a positive. Anything you have flex there is load you're losing from the tire. So I feel like that is unless you have really good a really good over rail design that doesn't let that happen. I feel like there's some flex that goes on there that you can't really necessarily control.
I'm going to assume that it's Patrick, but whatever. Carson, I have a 77 Impala stub. What lowers would work best on that? Well, actually, Patrick, the 77 Impala would be the wider version Impala, and so the lowers that come with that are pretty good. What we're talking about is the I don't even know what the 77 mid-size stuff is the stuff that once again, I mean, that's what all the stock cars are built out of. So I'm not saying that it won't work. It's just not my preference. Okay, 2 more questions. What's the most you want to run for rear steer and a 3-link? You know, in my opinion, when you're talking about rear steer, of course, you know, you got to keep in mind we're using left rear bar angle to get to get more drive angle in the car, which is going to create steer. I don't know if there's an actual number that I would actually say would be, you know, our stuff is about 2 1/4 inches at max bar, but then once again, we adjust the chain accordingly so that if the car is getting too much steer later on in the night, and that's something too, that a lot of people will think that the racetrack gets real dry slick and they think that we got to tighten the car up and take steer out and do all these other things. And actually, a lot of times that's a big mistake, because they forget that the fact that the racetrack slows down in track speed, and that's why I stress the fact in the schools that you need to monitor what the speed of the racetrack is doing, because all of a sudden, if you slow down and then you tighten the car up, you're killing yourself. You actually have to. It's all momentum racing especially with these crate motors and stuff. You got to get through the middle of the corner good, and so, you know, kind of do what you got to do to make it work. With less stagger, you know, maybe a little more steer might be an advantage. I don't know. We'll be able to access this later, or will we be able to? Yes. This will be on our YouTube deal. I think all shows are still on the YouTube deal, so you'll be able to go back and watch any of the shows that you want to, and watch how Chad and I were rookies when we were starting, and shit, now we're pros at this deal, and we even got Zach VanderBeek on here. I mean, yeah. This guy's a kind of a hero, you know?
I was kind of hoping they couldn't go back and watch it, because now they can hold me hostage to my answers.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully I was right.
Yeah, well, that's okay. You'll find out tomorrow.
Oh yeah, I'll have a bunch of text messages saying,
oh yeah.
I was either lying or I wasn't right.
Yeah. I will get some of them too, and I'm like, well, that's what I was thinking at the time, man.
Right.
I mean, you know, this is where you get to play that card where, God, I don't remember what I was thinking. That's a long time ago.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, we appreciate you coming on here tonight, Zach. It's a real thrill to have you on the show, and man, you did an awesome job. We need to almost have him on weekly or so here. Holy God!
Yeah, I don't know about that.
My throat's even still pretty good, so I'm in good shape here.
Well, you never let anybody else talk, so I was like, I'm going to get in here more.
You did a good job, man.
Poor Chad.
Yeah.
Talk.
Third string.
No, it's thanks for having me, and And like I said, we got really good people, and JD and my dad, my mom, and another person that I hadn't got a chance to mention, the DeYoung family, Matt DeYoung, or his boy McGuire's got our B-Mod stuff, and their manufacturing facility is awesome, and it's 2 miles up the road, and he takes care of. I've got well over 100 part numbers in the system with him, and so he's really been a huge asset. So thank God he loves racing, and his boy is in one of our cars, because he's I want to make sure he stays happy, and like I said, it's just, we got really good people, and it's we're only going to continue to get better.
Well, Matt does an awesome job of building parts and creating parts and coming up with new ideas. He's a real thrill for me to talk to, because he's just got a whole different business perspective on things, and which I'm quite sure you've probably experienced that. And those guys at DeYoung do an awesome job. They're a great facility.
Yes, for sure.
All right. Well, thanks again, and we appreciate it. And we'll see everybody here in 2 weeks. Of course, I get to see Chad here come Friday. Spend Friday and Saturday with Chad, so that's going to be exciting. And then when you get back from California, that should be our next show.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
You bet.